but this is really a corporate buyer's guide that we started 2 years ago in response to so much confusion out there, and we continue to update it now once a quarter. We just finished going through and, well, first of all, the main problem we're trying to address is making sense of this fast-moving market here. It is so confusing for vendors. It's so confusing for customers, consultants, us. And one of the things that we had, hang on, go back, is that we do research. We're leveraging our daily show, and we also had 25 vendor briefings here. So we actually sat down for an hour with OpenAI, Mistral, and others. Many of them are under NDA. They're getting value because we're seeing part of the markets they aren't, and really trying to do three things. One is key adoption trends we're seeing. I'd love to get feedback on what the second is, guidance for what we're starting to see from the vendors. And third is kind of predictions on what we're seeing in the market here. And the next few slides, 4 or 5 slides, I want to walk through what the team found. And John or others on the call, let us know. These are the vendors that covered in this report. I know Alden from Custom GPT's on. There might be a few others on as well. It's really broad. We're trying to look for technology that can be used in a variety of case studies to solve problems through multiple departments at a company here. It might be customer support, might be, it's not specifically on do-it-yourself technology. It's not specifically on a particular vertical area like code editing. It's broad from that. So we've done the best we can trying to leverage what we think are the most common ones out there. There's probably another 5 to 10 that we debate if should be on here or not. And then there's a whole slew of really specialized ones, Harvey for HR or Harvey for legal, whole bunch for code editing that we're not doing in this kind of general case buyer's guide. Key trends. A lot of this shouldn't be surprised, but just walk through. GenAI spending by companies continues to explode. In a number of companies, it's now head of security as a top budget area. So this has really been a continued important area that real money is being put in by. Many companies are now moving from pilots to production. And some of the, I think this was Bain saying the average in production now has doubled. Last year we were saying 15% of companies, something in production here, it's feeling like 30 to 40% now. And that continues to grow. We're seeing a real move away from the in-house to build as more and more companies become pragmatic. We have more companies asking us for, I want to buy, who should I be looking at, rather than what are the components, or I know I can't hire AI engineers fast enough. Talent, not surprising, is a key choke point, either through the consultants that they feel like they're overpaying for or hiring. And real movement in pricing. So real pushback in many companies of taking consumption risks, so pushing the ball. I don't want to be surprised as the tokens go up. And we saw, I think, probably about half, or at least a third of the vendors change their pricing models away from consumption to per seat or per feature or some kind of non-consumption based activities here. A few other major trends. Continued breathtaking investment. You guys have probably seen this, but 250 billion just from the hyperscaler. So the war between the Microsoft and IBM, and I mean, what IBM, but Microsoft, Google, and Amazon continue full throttle. The big four in terms of foundation models continues to solidify. OpenAI, Google, Anthropic, and Meta continue to be, in terms of just outright absolute magnitude of spend, ahead of the other smaller companies that are building proprietary models. And it appears to be ahead of what we can at least tell from the Chinese models. The revenue ramp for some of these vendors is breathtaking. OpenAI is 10 billion. I think there's a recent article saying there might be 12 billion. That's up from 4 the year before. Anthropic's headed towards 3 billion. Companies like Cohere and Glean and Mistral and Ryder are 50 at 100. You know, these are really solid revenue ramps from companies that were just a startup just a handful years ago. And we've also got a lot of vendors that are still raised a lot of money and don't have a lot of revenue here. So we're really starting to see a bifurcation in terms of revenue ramp. Um, Another thing that were really came up loud in this research was the Chinese models really becoming used and trusted by more companies, particularly when they're hosted in their trusted hyperscale like AWS or Azure. And DeepSeek continues to be one that, despite some concerns that it's from Chinese model, we're certainly seeing a lot of, that's not a lot, but we're certainly seeing major companies do pilots like HSBC, SAP, Airbnb, and others. Coding agents are clearly the sweet spot. This is the vibe coding and um, cursors of the world, but the kind of real scale in terms of rolling out across all the software is still not there yet, at least from the research that we saw. Questions on that, or I'll keep moving, or comments or disagreements?
Well, I just wanted to add an amazing statistic I heard, which is in the last quarter, um, the hyperscalers have spent more on CapEx than American consumers spent in consumption.
Yeah, breathtaking. A few other trends we saw, and I'll go right to left. Acceleration of the small language models. We're seeing more and more, at least consideration of that. And we think there's a whole, we don't think, we assert there's a whole new category of small models on device that's very different than small models being used and hosted or on-prem. Things like some of the Gemma models from Google or Quinn's got some small models. Microsoft's got some, Liquid's got some that are going to be used for smartphones and smart cars and everything else where you don't always have access to the internet. You have very small energy consumption requirements. So continue the small models. And we see small models as a way to really start chipping away at some of the total cost of ownership explosion we see out there as these tokens get used exponentially in many of these post-production environments. Agents real, we've been talking about that multiple times, but under a lot more guardrails. Certainly, most companies tell us they're incredibly concerned about what they can do without being in the governance, but they also want to support citizen coding and the potential to leverage their capabilities. Traceability and particularly explainability, how did this answer come out, is really, really, really important to many companies are telling us, particularly in the regulated industry. And we see that this may be increasingly difficult for some of the mega frontier models like OpenAI and others because it's so complex. And this may be increasingly a really good opportunity for companies that much more focus on this, particularly in prem, particularly ones like Seeker and others that have some innovation around explainability. Token-based models, consumption models face pushback. We mentioned that in an earlier slide. As with the open source, I'm kind of at 6 o'clock now coming around the circle here. On-prem and sovereign AI continue to move from niche to norm. We've seen lots of announcements from people like Denmark and countries buying their own data centers, buying their own, doing their own agreements with some of the leading companies like OpenAI. Many companies now are talking about what is own your own intelligence mean for me? What does it mean in prem, virtual private cloud, weights, everything else? So a lot more understanding that, boy, as I'm automating key cognitive tasks in my company, like drug discovery, stock trading, things like that, maybe it really is imperative for me to get more control over that, particularly if I have a love-hate relationship with my hyperscaler here. And governance is becoming critical. If you're interested in B2B, you've got to live within the governance structure, and how to do that responsibly is a key demand that enterprises have that we're finding that is not always addressed through the latest, greatest AI algorithmic innovation, but it is critical to get that purchase and move towards production. Uh, Questions on that before we go to vendor scoring or comments or critiques? Our vendor scoring is a little different than Gartner and others. We have 5 buckets. And so we don't evaluate the raw technology against benchmarks or do it ourselves here. We use a little more external things here. So we have a category around product and service innovation here. There's 4 or 5 categories under that. The quality of investors and the financial strength. We believe that this is a high moving market, and you do need a strong balance sheet and strong investors if you're going to be a viable vendor long term. Strategic relationships, particularly around distribution. We've seen obviously many categories. The biggest distribution has won, say, databases, and not always the best super widget, super product here. And one that's hard is publicly disclosed customers. We assert that if your technology and product is so good, it should be pretty easy to get some customers that are publicly disclosed, either in case studies on your website, press releases, or that we can talk to under NDA. And for each of the 30 vendors, we have a 2-page profile. And in that 2-page profile, there's a section called publicly disclosed customers here, which is hard for some of the early startups because they're still early on. But it really is a way that we get a lot of good feedback that helps the buying organizations differentiate between different vendors here. And then lastly, firm strength and quality here. This particular report, we actually end up creating 2 2x2s, which we're going to walk through in a second here. And we plotted, we go through and we do numerical rating on this. We challenge ourselves internally here. We have fact checks done with the vendors here. And then we plot them on these 2x2s I'm going to show you here next. And for each company, we get specific on what exactly is the product name, what the product does. And that's been non-trivial, just understanding all different product names out there because they move around so much. Akash, are you on by chance? But hopefully he's sleeping. The first one is really on foundation models. So this is review of companies that are investing in foundation models. It's mostly proprietary models or open source like Meta and DeepSeek that's come up a lot in the customers here. Not surprising through the ratings, Anthropic, OpenAI, and Google remain very strong leaders here. And the up and comers are the ones in the middle here, AI 21, Liquid, and others here. Those are really contenders that we see coming up here. And then there's a whole nother set that didn't make the report that I think on the bottom left, almost off the chart here, that are either got to really make some strides to get up into this competitive market here or aren't going to make it here. So there's been a lot of flux in this whole channel here. It's been surprising to us that some companies continue to lean heavily into building their own proprietary models. H2O AI and Writer are 2 examples that come to mind because it's expensive. And we continue to see many people assert that larger is better. Unclear if that will remain over time. Are comments on this slide or feedback or disagreements? Surprises?
What is the reason why they would try to build their own models? Like, what are the deficiencies? Is there a published study, or how do they go about it?
Well, part of it is their lineage of that. Both for Writer and H2O, for instance, they all started building their models 4 or 5 years ago. So they feel they continue to have a competitive advantage for that is one. When you look at the absolute spending, our view, we're asking Writer and H2O, are you asserting that your 3 or 10 or even $20 million a year you're spending on your R&D on your proprietary model is going to keep up with the 50, 100, maybe $300 million a year that Anthropic or OpenAI is spending? They assert that it is. They also assert that they're getting much closer alignment with other features that customers value here. You're going to see in the other slide here, other people are also moving to a much more agnostic way. So they're kind of moving up the stack and saying we're going to be more agnostic, or at least work with 4 or 5 different LLM models here. And that's what the next slide is. Does that make sense? Did I answer your question?
It did. The lineage part, it definitely did, Paul. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Michael.
Hey, Paul, thanks. Just quick question about the source. I know looks like it was gathered from proprietary methodology, but can you share kind of roughly, is this kind of like Gartner or how are you gathering this metric here?
Yeah, no, yeah, it's very much like Gartner. So we're sending a spreadsheet of information requests to these vendors. They're filling it out. We're having an hour, sometimes hour and a half product briefing with the vendor. We're scoring them. We're coming back and fact checking that. So it's our best guess on being neutral and analyzing it from that standpoint. And it's
Thanks.
if you and it's Gardner's got two similar models and we're very different. So very interesting comparison is compare our what our team ended up coming out with versus Gartner. Did that help, Michael?
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Paul.
Yeah. Yeah, and we think Gartner's are great. I think it's a fast-moving market, and 10% of the companies out there subscribe to Gartner, and a handful of them also subscribe to us. So it's um, so that's one. And then the second quadrant we have is I don't right. Well, we're still debating internally with the right word, but this is really building apps around multiple different models here. We're calling it LLM ops for now, and you can see the ones who are emerging as leaders there. This is where the company's saying we have a variety of tools from model management to modeling to data pipeline to help you manage that. Well, we've got two or sometimes multiple models, sometimes three or four certified models here and Cohere in particular, Databricks is showing up where Writer is one that we've been hearing a lot about. And then on the bottom left, and this is really biased for number of customers. So you can see in the top right, these larger companies, because our methodology has these public customers and they've got more distribution out of the box, they're able to get a little more to the right because of these public customer weights of ours. But the ones coming up in the middle here, the Seekers and AI 21s, they're definitely real contenders here. And we're finding more and more really happy customers down there, particularly customers that are interested in premise-based or virtual private cloud-based. So people like Victera and AI 21 and Liquid on device here are really serving part of that market that a hosted solution may not fit from a OpenAI or Cohere.
So is it, Paul, is OpenAI really not even make the list?
Well, if you ask OpenAI, they're not working with any other model.
So that's one of the distinguishing
Correct.
criteria here is you have to support multiple
Multiple
models.
models, correct, is yes. And most of them, like Seeker and others, some will support three or four, certified three or four, and use other ones with multiple ones here. Certainly the hyperscalers are doing multiple ones. Cohere is increasingly using multiple ones. Databricks using multiple ones. Writers claiming they're using multiple ones. We can debate that.
Yeah, interesting. Okay.
We've
I
given
think it's
them
I think it's a mistake not to mention OpenAI somehow because they have such a huge market presence to say that they
don't have
you got to somehow. I was confused, right? Because like, well, how can OpenAI not be on this list?
a good criticism, Tim. Yeah, that's a good critique. Yeah, we'll take it.
So there
Yeah.
is a difference. I see what you're saying. There's a difference between general operational support across models versus you don't want to appear to be saying OpenAI doesn't have good support for
Correct.
their models. That's just only for their model.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Mhm.
It's a good critique though, Tim. I agree. We can other thoughts or critiques? Let's keep driving. A few other ones that we've really notable here. Alden's company, who's on the line here. Alden, we continue to think real highly of you. Really interesting. The no code niche that they've carved out. Glean is one. It's really on the enterprise search side. That's come up a lot. A lot of confusion on is enterprise search. The same thing as that. They're getting into agents as well. So we've got multiple companies that are trying to figure out how they can agent at department level and looking at Glean here. Pinecone is another one, obviously, in the whole vector database here. Vantic has impressed us with some of their event-driven stuff, particularly around some of the premise and meter data. And Salesforce, I think we still debate, if they've bitten off way more they can choose on the agent force. But in terms of companies asking us how to extend Salesforce for CRM and customer service applications, it's one that we continue to see come up a lot, and that we think are well positioned, particularly if they start changing some of the messaging to be much more on their strength, rather than trying to get, which we believe is a mistake, trying to be agent force, an independent agent for all different departments and use cases in the enterprise, even if it's not connected to Salesforce. We find, at least our team has found that be naive and not convincing. Just a few other thoughts, and we'll finish up and go to open mic. Let's see here. These are challenges here. Let me skip, but we've talked a lot about this in the last few weeks here. Case studies, we continue to work hard to improve our case studies. It's an area that we're getting a lot more requests for. We're trying to develop a little more systematic way of grading them and getting them out there. We just started actually a big project with a major PE firm that's extremely interested in case studies on sales and marketing, customer support for mid-size OEM and distribution firms here. And it's one thing that we're seeing more and more as this market moves from kind of build it, give me the right tools, to I want to buy, but I'm a little more pragmatic, and I want to buy a vendor that's tested. I want to buy a vendor that's done a 3 or 4 more case studies and something that looks like me. So that second phase of Jeffrey Moore's model is what we've been working on a lot more here. John Sfielka, you're on. John, what other surprised you about all the briefings we did that you want to share?
I think that the big thing I saw is how far a lot of these companies need to go to really understand how to serve enterprises. That was big, even ones that you would think would know better, So I think that's a testimony to the power of the technology, because people are adopting anyway, because the enterprise support from a lot of these companies is pretty naive. So I think that's one biggie. I think the second thing is really how early the market still is. And what I mean by that is the thing I think we're seeing again and again, by companies that have things in production, is the need for executive education, executive development, people development, how to think about these problems, the organizational transformation piece, how do I organize? And under the broad notion that we've been talking about, which is you can buy a technology, but you have to grow a capability. And growing that capability just takes a lot of effort. And I think it's just a testimony to the power of the technology that it has gotten adopted so fast, given those two big, kind of things that slow things down. So those are two big impressions I really took away.
One thing, John, you're talking, so when we do that, we record the product briefing with the vendor here, take notes, and we have a major product briefing with the customer every other quarter. So we do Q4 and kind of Q2. And then the interim things, we just do factual updates here. So before we do another product briefing, we go back and listen to the product briefing from before. So before we did this update, we listened to all the product briefings from December. And Michael and other, it was shocking. There's vendors, I don't want to use the names, saying to some, we are the definitive best proprietary model. Nothing's going to do it. And 6 months later, they've completely abandoned doing a proprietary model here. So we've seen people completely abandon doing proprietary models. We've seen people, they said, we're only going to be using our model. Now they're model agnostic. They're going to be model routing here. So radical change in roadmaps. And for people to do enterprise roadmap, that's you don't change your roadmap that radically. I think just shows you how intense this market is moving.
Absolutely. Yeah, and the scale. I mean, it's just like, the mega scalers are spending tens of billions of dollars in infrastructure like that, like just rolling it out, and I mean, you look at what Zuckerberg's doing with talent, right? Just a kid just turned down $500 million pay offer. So at the top of the market, you've got that going on. I said the other thing that's starting to happen is this whole the relationship between traditional political pork barreling with infrastructure around power. And power is a beautiful political vehicle to spend money underneath.
But electrical power, you mean, John?
Electrical power, yeah.
Not political power.
Yeah, no, but they go hand in hand. I mean, when you're starting to like the thing that Trump was involved in Western Pennsylvania, I had a couple friends who went to it, and it was really well orchestrated from a political standpoint. This is the new senator from Pennsylvania. I didn't realize Western Pennsylvania is the fourth largest gas field in the world. And so there's a whole bunch of fossil fuel support out there. And then you got Carnegie Mellon and the notion of creating critical infrastructure in Western Pennsylvania with a combination of power and compute, and the explosion that we're seeing in demand for silicon intelligence. And silicon intelligence is just so power inefficient, right? This thing is, depending upon how you count it, 10,000 to 1 million times more efficient than silicon intelligence doing similar tasks. So biological intelligence is really energy efficient so far, but I just think we didn't get into in this report, but I think our next report, this whole notion of like the interplay between power and electrical power and silicon intelligence is going to be big.
A few other things that I just shared, John's, and it was again, I don't want to use names, but surprising to us, some of the companies that have raised hundreds of millions of dollars, a few cases billions of dollars, how they're still in the kind of R&D mode. Dean,
Oh yeah,
my widget. Did I tell you, Paul, what this scored on this thing here? And we're like, yeah, but do you have any customers? And they said, no, we're going to sell the enterprise. Do you want Arbonne, rollbacks? I mean, so the gap between nirvana of raising money and being a darling of the investment versus actually moving over and getting customers, particularly in enterprise, is really a large chasm in some of these companies here, Michael. We're at senior levels of some of these companies. I mean, real founders, CEO, board members, and everything else. So I think a kind of classic early indication of early markets in terms of
yeah.
moving from funding to real customer traction. Yeah, go ahead, Raymond.
I think being out here next to the valley, I think part of it begins to get emotional, because when you guys show the amount of money that is being spent, and if you look at our group here, how many of us in this group are accessing that much resource, have access to that much capital? And you have these people come, young people, whether they have connections or whatever, getting $500 million. So, I just don't, I think there's an imbalance here. There's an imbalance coming, and it's already here, I think, when you talk about, just the low level who has access and who's able to utilize these tools and who has the resources to build them. But where's all this money going? I mean, I understand some of it goes to compute, but there's people that are getting some of this money, and none of us, like I said, none of us in this group or that I know of are getting this kind of capital. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of, it's something to question.
There's a lot of walking around unicorn dead companies in the valley. 24, I think, have raised more than $500 million and have less than revenue. I mean, it's really shocking. Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, we used to say even 30 years ago, startups should never happen because large companies have all the customer relationship, all the capital, all the infrastructure. It's so hard to create a new company from scratch and make it work. And Clay Christensen made a whole career out of this with the innovator's dilemma, and all the reasons why large companies tend to fail at the next business, whatever the next business is. I think we're in a different world now. I think these mega companies have so much capital and are so large and powerful that they're willing to waste it, which is what it would have been called in earlier days, which is what made the entrepreneurs successful, in spending $100 million plus to hire a single individual. That the venture capitalists always used to say, oh, I'll pay $1 million a year for the right person, but they would never do that. They would never do that. It was never even close. So they would pay maybe some good money, but they'd mostly lay out a lot of stock and equity and say, go start a company. And if you went to Microsoft, even 20 years ago, they would never have paid a software engineer $1 million a year, lots of stock, but they would never have even paid them $1 million a year, much less $100 million a year or more. So I think it's a different world. I think these firms have enough money that they are not afraid. You know, John, you were making the remark about CapEx. They're not afraid to go to their boards and say, I'm going to spend $1 billion to hire 5 people, 10 people, because I can get that much leverage out of them. That's just so different to me. And they're also doing these acqui hires like Together AI and Character AI. So they're finding ways to get talent without having to acquire companies. And that's just a very different world. We thought, many of us, it might turn into something like this 20, 15 years ago when machine learning and software really started, and Google started to get so big and so profitable, but it didn't happen. But now it is. So it's like baseball players and basketball players now.
Yeah.
That's a different world. That's
Well,
a
and a lot of
world where
people
money
comparing
rules.
and Zuckerberg, the Yankee, just spending, you know, in the LA Dodgers.
It's
like
what it is. It's like the
Taylor's,
Yankees. And you can say Oakland will come up with Moneyball, but Oakland still spent a lot of money on their players, just less than the Yankees. Okay. It wasn't like they were some little 2-bit startup paying them $100,000 a year. And so that's very different to me. So I think startups, there'll still be startups. I think there's plenty of room. There's so much opportunity for growth here, but I don't see another Google. I don't see another Microsoft the way that we would have maybe 20 or 30 years ago.
other than NVIDIA?
NVIDIA has been around forever, and they've grown tremendously, just like Microsoft's been around forever. So they've been a player forever. They're not a startup. I think that and hardware might be a little different. We'll see, you know, because there's Cerebras and a couple of the other hardware startups. They may make some money, but I don't think they're going to make a lot of inroad on NVIDIA. And NVIDIA was a big and powerful company before all this started, just
Yeah.
like Microsoft. They just become now, it's so large. It's hard for us to imagine how much money these companies, I can't imagine. Can you imagine going to a 22-year-old and saying, I'll pay you $100 million guaranteed? $100 million. That is sports. That's like, you know, the top NFL draft pick kind of thing. There's nothing like that we've ever seen in business before.
Yeah. Go ahead, John, and then Ben. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think, Tim, I would make a distinction. It's not big companies and small companies. It's founder-led companies versus non-founder-led companies. Big difference. No company has reinvented itself after the founder really got completely gone. Disney doesn't sell anything right today that Disney didn't invent, right? They upgraded it. Same with Apple. Apple isn't selling anything today that Jobs didn't invent, and they've optimized the living daylights out of it. God love them. But I would to go back to Raymond's question. Raymond, I think that the question of resources. Look, um, if it weren't for Teddy Roosevelt, Rockefeller would still control a lot of the oil. Okay, and so we haven't enforced antitrust since the AT&T decision. Period. And for tech, we've done no antitrust. So to answer your question, where do you get the capital? I think it's the open source movement. I think the open source movement, and what's interesting is now the Chinese are the biggest purveyors of the open source movement because of which I think is really kind of interesting because the open source movement is the most successful communist organization in the world, right? Um, and so I think it's the open source movement that is the counterbalance, right? Because you get the IP, you've got the talent, you've got people who have a different motivation, and you know I'm a huge believer in open source, strong encryption, crypto. You know, decentralize some of this power because those are other forms of capital that aren't monetary capital. Would be my statement to you, Raymond. And no offense, Raymond, but we're not coming by shortly with a $50 million offer. So
It's a different world. Yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, talking about some of these high-paying folks, I guess there's a question of just for you, Paul, of like what information have you captured on like AI impacting jobs in a negative way, as we've seen some of that happen? Is that something that y'all are keeping track of, or maybe others know of other data that might be useful for that trend, because I mean, it seems like that is another thing that will continue, or I can imagine at least if in a capitalistic society that we're incentivized to like cut costs, and if AI continues to show promise and enables us to remove waste from the system, then a lot of times that ends up being like human labor. So it's unsure of like when and how that might sort of pan out. And sometimes like, well, you get pushed to like, well, there's going to be new startups or there's going to be new opportunity for growth. And I'm hearing there's even questions on that, which I have concerns about as well. So yeah, this puts us in a really weird situation, like if that trend continues, because I don't think it's even good for large enterprises to just see an economic model come about that just continues to separate the haves and the haves not. Like, does that even work for an economy in the future?
Yeah, I mean, Ben, to answer quick, we don't track it, but it's been very clear. I mean, Microsoft, Amazon, dozens of companies that said we are cutting software jobs because of AI. A lot of people think the softening of the market for recent computer science grads is directly a result of Cursor and others. We have companies telling us right and left that they're going after hard, a number of developers they have, a number of business analysts they have. We've seen Amazon say they used to staff a development team with a minimum of 8, and now, or maximum of 8. Now they're saying it's a maximum of 5 for all new going forward here. So I think it's very real already.
Yeah, I agree. If you don't mind, just a follow up is like that that doesn't seem sustainable, I guess. If we continue down that road where we automate everything, if we could do it, someone with the money would certainly love to go that route. If we're going to stay designed the way that we are today, that's concerning, I think, for one. But I think it does offer alternative models for even doing business. And the thing that you've raised that I really like that kind of applies to some thinking I'm putting to this right now is just business model thinking, is the idea of owning your own intelligence and what happens as we're putting into the system. I mean, even now as we're talking, we're putting into the AI system, and that's being taken and hopefully used for value somehow, for yourself or for others. That's a constant thing that will continue to happen. I mean, people are going into meetings. At the end of it, it's creating a product requirement document that's going to the AI bot that's building the version of that feature and then creating a PR and giving it back to review within a couple hours. And that's just from people having a conversation. I imagine more of that's going to be built into products itself, which is what I'm trying to look at and work and see what features of this like work for us. But what about who owns it? And I think there's an opportunity here, and this is what I'm kind of pushing this idea a little bit of around co-ops, so that we can all sort of own our intelligence as we build the thing. Because we're all building the things right now, but as it gets cheaper, then we can all build like all the things, right? Like, and I don't know that a SaaS model is even going to survive, and we can all just build the thing. And it's too early for that. Maybe right now, it was really interesting to see the in-house has gone down as far as spend or putting your own sort of custom AI solutions in. But yeah, if the tech companies are laying off the developers, then I don't know, what are we going to do to survive?
Big question. Yeah, go ahead, Karen, and then Raymond.
Yeah, you know me, I'm an optimist, and I think this notion of concentrating all of this wealth into a few hands is unsustainable, partly because how can those people bring enough value to pay for that? I mean, what if they have an emotional crisis? I mean, it's really putting too much on a few people. And I think companies are going to start realizing that there are this is the opportunity to reinvent work and reinvent the jobs that we do. So, we've just got to think about the human connections that have to be that where we can play a part. But I think those roles are coming.
Karen, I want your optimism. Go ahead, Raymond.
Yeah, I think that the human roles are already here. We're here. We're not going anywhere, right? So and going back to like the groups that have access to these resources now and are getting all this investment. The thing that gets me is that nobody knows the answer right now. Everything is experimental. So even though these folks are being paid, these high, amounts, they're still just experimenting. and so it's just, I don't know. I don't know. And then the other thing I was going to say was that I think it was John that had mentioned own your own intelligence like a year ago, wasn't it?
Yeah.
That we were talking about own your own intelligence like a year ago. And I took that to heart like right away. That's when I was, working with Olama and LM Studio and, running stuff locally in Docker, that's a key aspect of AI. And that feeds into the small models on the device, being able to have memory on your device and having your own model and having our own personal AIs. So it all fits. It all fits.
And then Raymond, even putting Bitcoin in there for some more decentralized commerce, it might even go there as well. Yeah. Go ahead, John. Why don't you finish up and we'll end early here.
Yeah, well, I think, I would say that in the short term, I think we have to think about what's the common good, like what's the public library, what kind of investment do we want to make in people to upskill them. I think we have to reinvent education. I think AI is as important as literacy, I think, understanding how to use it at least. And so we have to, then I think we have to start having that conversation. To me, the longer term conversation is a combination of at least three things. One is market power. You have to remember the dark enlightened people. So these are people like Peter Thiel, Musk, Anderson. They believe in monarchy and they don't believe in democracy. They think democracy is inefficient. So that I think that's a bad thing to have the wealthiest people in the world think that we shouldn't have votes. Okay, so that's going on right now. So you have to think of a counterbalance to them. I think the other thing is we have to re-examine property. We're using a property regime from pre-digital. If you think of just three fundamental forms of property: behavior, cognition, cognitive capital, behavioral capital, and network capital. Right now, the mega scalers own all of that. And I would say one of the reasons they own it is I don't have a good way to contract for it. Just like if I own a piece of land, I can sell air rights, I can sell mineral rights, I can sell rights of way, right? Things like that. Those are all innovations around title. The title that we have in cyberspace is insufficient to the task. I want at least here's three new forms of title. I want transaction title. So when I'm doing this thing on Zoom, I contract with Zoom just to make this call work, and that's it. Then I have ambient title. I want to, like, who I'm talking to, where I am I moving or not. I want title to that information. And then I want analytic title. What's my tone of voice? These are things that people are already selling, right? Meta is selling all these things under one giant piece of title that looks like 13th century England where the king owned everything. I want to pull that property apart so I can contract for it.
Yeah, John, I think, and one thing people know in America, they have title to your mineral rights underground, which allowed the whole fracking
Right.
revolution. I think over in Europe, they didn't have that. So fracking's not taken off in Europe because it's not clear who owns those rights and can sell them.
And plus in water, they don't in Europe, they don't socialize the water the way they do here.
Well, wonderful. Well, let's leave on a more optimistic note here. The world is changing. We at least have a buyer's guard and making some sense about it. It's unbelievable. I was reminded just today that the deep research models, where's my Raymond? Raymond and Alden, deep research model has only been out since December. I mean, it's like 9 months and it's a commodity, and now there's like 15 different versions and Google has Deep Think and whatever it is. And it's really breathtaking the changes in just 6 to 9 months. I had a lunch today with a buddy who hasn't been paying attention to this and still thinking the world, yesterday, it was still thinking the world's 3.5. And if you aren't paying attention, the whole world is driven by. Go ahead, Alden.
Yeah, so two trends. One is the deep research part where what we are seeing is, they are now starting to impact processes like sales, for example, right? Previously, if somebody had to sign up for a service, we had no clue who that person was. But now it automatically triggers a workflow where I can do like a whole PhD on whoever signed up and create like a deep research and connect it to the sales processes. So a lot of these things which were tech now are starting to become like real business processes. The other point I'm noticing is that, people will be expected to come along with their own team of AI agents. Like you call it own your own intelligence, right? But just think of it like, when you hire a plumber, you're expecting him to come with his tools, his hammer. You don't have the plumbers telling you like, hey, can I borrow your hammer or something like that.
Really?
And the same thing is happening like when somebody is being hired for customer service. My first question to him is, okay, show me the top 10 agents that you have deployed, that you have played around with. Show me the results, show me the ticket deflection rate, show me what the customer satisfaction was, right? And so that form, the department is changing. Previously, we would have hired like 15 people for customer support. Now you hire like one or two, and you have these 16, 17 agents that are doing like the various functions.
I love it. And we keep using the right analogy. And one of the things that John and I have been brainstorming is the Delta Force. So when you come to work for your company, I need to show up with my Delta Force. But the
Yeah,
robots I've already developed, that already honed, that already know my work style. And I want to bring those robots and me into one task you have.
totally, totally. I remember there was some Steven Seagal movie where the president called Steven Seagal. And the first thing Steven Seagal does is like, hang on, let me call my team.
Yeah.
And then they show like 8 people like getting off a plane and like, that's it. That's the team. Right. And this is no different. Like if you're hiring somebody for marketing, you would never hire somebody who's like, oh, I'll do I'll do it all myself or something. Like, where's your AI team? Is
And you
a
should have on your resume. You're hiring me
exact
and my team here. You're not just hiring me, Raymond. I'm bringing my whole crew with me, and we're going to really rip up whatever you're talking about here. That's
exactly.
great. Well, good. Well, let's end that. One last thing I have. We had a call with the CEO of a residential solar company of 45,000 employees. They aren't even aware. Where's Rosemary? Rosemary, they aren't even aware of answer engines. And I put the name of their company in. Is this good? Who's their competitors? It lists the 6 or 8 competitors in Massachusetts, which they're a competitor here, how they different. And at the end, OpenAI said, do you want me to contact them to start getting quotes? So this moving from search engines to answer engines to task engine is already happening. And I took screenshots of this and sent it over to, I don't want to name the company, the CEO of that, and they aren't even aware of it. So yet another dimension, uh, Rosemary and Alden, on the huge misunderstanding that so many of these companies have. And these guys are residential solar. I mean, they get a whole bunch of, and so that's all about new customer acquisition here, because once you put solar on a heist, Michael, you don't need to keep going back to it. You just need new leads for it. So wasn't even on the radar screen. So really good conversation as usual. Tim, great feedback, everyone. Let's keep the conversation going and keep the learning. And let's keep the word out. We got to get this group growing here. I know we got to do better marketing here, but boy, there's a lot of great thoughts and talent in this room here, and we can help others learn as well. So thanks, everyone. Have a good week.